Time to talk about Epstein and to talk about Diddy and to not see them as the same situation. Like, there's so many intersections.
Okay, I'm joined now by someone, and this is interesting, with intimate knowledge of the very jail cell Epstein died in.
Bill Gates. There's a draft email in the documents that Epstein was apparently writing to himself back in July of 2013, and in it he addressed Bill Gates, accusing him of recently disregarding their friendship, or whatever twisted relationship they had, from helping Bill to get drugs in order to deal with consequences of sex with Russian girls.
The Sean Carter references, the Jay-Z references are very interesting on so many levels.
I know I'm about to sound completely insane, but just hear me out. This pertains to the Epstein files, the Clintons, and cannibalism, and I feel completely fine and I'm totally okay. Alright, let's do this. How do we know if someone is a cannibal?
When you see that there's some people on the list that is no longer with us. David Stern, the NBA commissioner, he's no longer with us. Michael Jackson, his name was
Which
on this
was
list.
odd.
Everybody laughed at Jaguar Wright. They called her crazy. They said she was bitter, out of touch, and just desperately reaching for relevance in an industry that had left her behind. But right now, as federal files drop like dominoes and millions of pages of classified documents hit the public eye, people aren't laughing so much anymore. In fact, a chilling silence has fallen over Hollywood and the global elite. This entire avalanche started when names from the infamous Epstein files began surfacing again. We aren't just talking about mid-level executives, we're talking about massive, globally recognized names. For years, Jaguar has been screaming into the void that the mainstream entertainment world and the ultra-wealthy billionaire class are deeply connected and fundamentally messed up. Now, it seems she has been completely validated. In the wake of these massive document releases, one glaring observation has come to the forefront, and that is the terrifying similarity between Jeffrey Epstein and Sean Combs, known to the world as Diddy. People have treated these as two separate scandals, but investigators and insiders are realizing they might just be different branches of the exact same tree.
Time to talk about Epstein and to talk about Diddy and to not see them as the same situation. Like, there's so many intersections between Epstein and Diddy that we're not even paying attention to. And people who were regulars in the Epstein crew.
The intersections between Epstein and Diddy are so vast and so deeply intertwined that it is almost impossible to ignore. Epstein operated in a realm of untouchable wealth, international influence, private planes, and elite political circles. Diddy operated in the cultural epicenter of music, high fashion, and the exclusive power rooms of Hollywood. But their playbooks were practically identical. Jaguar's core argument is that Diddy was never some isolated figure operating a rogue criminal enterprise all by himself. He was a highly functional gear inside a much larger, darker ecosystem. Both men seemed to specialize in the exact same currency, gathering leverage. They hosted infamous private gatherings, curated guest lists of the most powerful people on the planet, and allegedly made sure that every illicit activity was documented. If Epstein was heavily protected by the system for decades, the terrifying question becomes, who exactly was protecting Diddy and who is still being protected today?
When you see that there's some people on the list that is no longer with us. David Stern, the NBA commissioner, he's no longer with us. Michael Jackson, his name was
Which
on this
was
list.
odd. That was odd too. Chris Tucker showed up. Like, a lot of people showed up. But the funny thing is it's who they're putting up, what they're pushing forward, what they're holding back on. The Sean Carter references, the Jay-Z references are very interesting on so many levels because it's being mentioned from different foyers, like from different aspects.
But the rabbit hole goes much deeper than that, especially when you look at who the media chooses to focus on and who gets entirely ignored. There is a bizarre selective blindness when it comes to the names pulled from these flight logs.
I'm still shocked that there's nothing about Naomi Campbell really coming forward yet. I'm surprised. I'm like bitterly surprised. Her
Yeah,
time.
they said her name was on the list like the most as far as like flight records.
Yeah.
She was on a lot of flights.
A lot of flights.
You mentioned
also Diddy's ex-girlfriend.
Hey. Hey.
That's funny. What a small world.
And speaking of secrets, nothing is more unsettling than the dark shadow cast over one of the world's most famous tech giants. Bill Gates spent decades building a pristine public image as a philanthropic savior, but the newly released documents paint a deeply disturbing picture of his dynamic with Epstein.
Bill Gates, there's a draft email in the documents that Epstein was apparently writing to himself back in July of 2013, and in it he addressed Bill Gates, accusing him of recently disregarding their friendship or whatever twisted relationship they had. He also mentioned Gates allegedly asking him to delete some past communications. And when it's past communications with Jeffrey Epstein, the reason why you'd want them to be deleted is easy to speculate about. Here is from the draft email, this section. To add insult to the injury, them implore me to please delete the emails regarding your STD, your request that I provide you antibiotics that you can surreptitiously give to Melinda, and the description of your...
How strange that is.
And so sometimes these emails are hard to understand or follow from Jeffrey Epstein because he wrote like an absolute illiterate madman. I don't know entirely why one of the richest men in the world would need antibiotics to be provided by Jeffrey Epstein.
I do.
Okay, well, they're referencing something there. There was also a draft email that Epstein appeared to be writing on behalf of Gates' longtime science advisor, Boris Nikolic, about his intent to leave the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This is from July of 2013. Epstein wrote in his voice, by the way, for this. During the past few weeks, I have been caught up in a severe marital dispute between Melinda and Bill. In my role as his right hand, I have been asked on multiple occasions, and in hindsight, wrongly acquiesced into participating in things that have ranged from the morally inappropriate to the ethically unsound, and have been repeatedly asked to do other things that get near and potentially over the line into the illegal. From helping Bill to get drugs in order to deal with consequences of with Russian girls, to facilitating his illicit trysts with married women, to being asked to provide Adderall for bridge tournaments, I feel I owe it to my friends and future colleagues to admit a moral failure, to ask forgiveness, and to move on with my life.
This was not an accident. This was not like, oh, golly gee, here's the wild guy. Oh, Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, yeah, he's the pedo that all the powerful people randomly know about and like and constantly go to. And he writes blackmail emails to them. And he brags about how he's constantly helping the Israelis with their spies and their ex-presidents. And we can't put 2 and 2 together? No, I put it together. It's 4. So mainstream media can tell you it's 5 or 0, but they're giant liars. Epstein was clearly part of Israel's operations here, and they're clearly were trying to blackmail the most powerful people in the country.
And that complete disregard for normal rules brings us to the most debated mystery of the modern era, the impossible demise of Jeffrey Epstein. Officially, the narrative claims he took his own life while sitting in a federal holding cell, but the broken cameras, the highly trained guards who miraculously both fell asleep at the exact same time, and the missing surveillance footage created a story that absolutely nobody bought. To understand just how ridiculous the official story is, you have to listen to the experts who have actually lived inside those walls.
Okay, I'm joined now by someone, and this is interesting, with intimate knowledge of the very jail cell Epstein died in. Michael Francis, he was a capo for the Colombo crime family in the 1980s. He served time in the exact cell where Epstein was later held. Michael, welcome back to the program. Tell us about that cell, and what do you make of these revelations that there is a minute missing from the surveillance video, Michael?
Well, listen, I spent 7 months on that tier and in those cells. And the first thing I have to say, there's no way you are able to commit suicide. There's just no way. There's no way to hang yourself. There's nothing from the ceiling. There's nothing from the bed. You'd have to be a midget and work really hard to try to hang yourself. And I don't think you can accomplish it at that point. As far as the cameras being off, I haven't experienced that. I did 8 years in prison, and I haven't experienced cameras being broken in the perfect storm of correctional officers not walking those cells. They walk in and they look in on you all the time. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's embarrassing to go to the toilet because they're walking past you and looking in the cell constantly. So I've said this from day one. I do not believe it was suicide. I can't talk about what happened to him, but I don't believe it was a suicide because you just couldn't physically do it. It would be almost impossible to do it. So that's number one.
It must be interesting, Michael. When you look at the video, though, it must be interesting because you know the area. I mean, we all look at this and it just looks like a prison, but this must look very familiar to you.
Absolutely. Very familiar. And the fact that a minute is missing, look, everything around this guy, I just did a very deep dive into him, which I'll be releasing on my platform in the next several days. Look, there's no way that this person operated alone. Look, they have the videos. Alan Dershowitz recently said that he saw the client list, but because there's people that he can't, because he's an attorney, he can't, reveal what he saw. But he said he saw the client list. He's demanding that it be released. To think that there's no flight logs, that there's no client list, that the thousands of recordings that they had, because I found out for sure that he had cameras on every bedroom, recording everything. And all of a sudden, all of it is gone. I mean, none of this makes sense.
But if someone orchestrated that silence, you have to look at the people who had the most to lose, starting with the man who financed the entire nightmare. Les Wexner, the billionaire mastermind behind retail empires like Victoria's Secret, is widely considered one of Epstein's closest known benefactors. Wexner recently found himself sitting in a closed-door deposition before the House Oversight Committee, trying to explain away a relationship that spans decades.
Billionaire Les Wexner, one of the closest known benefactors of Jeffrey Epstein, says he was, quote, naive, foolish, and gullible for trusting the late convicted offender. The 88-year-old testified before members of the House Oversight Committee in a closed-door deposition yesterday. He previously led the former parent company of Victoria's Secret and hired Epstein to manage his money in the mid-1980s. In his prepared opening statement, Wexner said he cut ties with Epstein shortly after his arrest in late 2006, but the latest release of Epstein files show the two stayed in touch past then. In her book, Selling Sexy, Victoria's Secret and the Unraveling of an American Icon, CBS News contributor and Puck fashion correspondent Lauren Sherman discusses Wexner's years-long relationship with Epstein, and Lauren joins us now. So tell us more about their relationship.
So Epstein was advising Wexner since the early 80s. He was introduced to him by the guys at Bear Stearns. He was vetted by him. He was a casual advisor. And then by the early 1990s, Wexner actually granted him power of attorney, which we all know is a very rare thing to do with a financial advisor. And he had that until 2007 when all these accusations and Epstein started to get into really big trouble. Wexner has tried to remove himself from the Epstein narrative, but the reality is he made Epstein very rich. And so the two men have been intertwined and have affected Wexner's legacy as an entrepreneur and a person who really built a lot of Ohio over the last 40 years.
An inventory. But then there was I hired a lady to be like the house manager who had run the U.S. Embassy in Rome, and she said, yeah, I know how to do this. And I said, well, why don't we keep inventories of stuff? And she said, well, yeah, I could do that. So she did that as kind of a puny example, but I wouldn't have had the idea. But then all the things were inventoried. That wasn't work for me or Jeffrey. It was just regularly done.
Answer the question. 5 words, okay? Answer the question.
Okay.
Another part of the story that caught attention involves a rare disease called kuru. Kuru was first discovered in the 20th century among certain tribes in Papua New Guinea. Scientists found that it's caused by prions damaged proteins that attack the brain. It can lead to tremors, loss of muscle control, and speech problems. When an old video surfaced of Jeffrey Epstein showing unusual mouth movements, internet users began speculating. Some tried to connect it to kuru. Medical experts, however, warn that you cannot diagnose a complex brain disease from a short video clip. Still, speculation spread fast.
I know I'm about to sound completely insane, but just hear me out. This pertains to the Epstein files, the Clintons, and cannibalism, and I feel completely fine and I'm totally okay. Alright, let's do this. How do we know if someone is a cannibal? Well, they could have the Kuru disease, which is a fatal neurodegenerative disease that spreads through eating brain tissue. It has a long incubation period, 10 to 30 years. Early symptoms are headaches, coordination issues, anxiety, and inappropriate laughter. Middle stage, severe tremors and shaking, loss of balance, and slurred speech. Late stage, inability to walk, dementia, and the forever sleep. Do you know of any elites rumored to have consumed human flesh? But I'm not accusing anyone of anything, this is just a fun little joke video. With truth in the mix, in Papua New Guinea they call human long pig. We just love to have fun here. No, the Kuru disease has nothing to do with the Epstein files or anyone in them. Definitely not the Clintons. And I feel fantastic, so yeah, have a good day, okay.
And the panic isn't just confined to billionaires. It has fully infiltrated the highest levels of the United States justice system. Just as the public started demanding real accountability, a massive cover-up seemingly unfolded right before our eyes. In July of 2025, the U.S. Department of Justice abruptly fired a top federal prosecutor from the Southern District of New York. Her name was Maureen Comey. If that last name sounds familiar, it's because she is the daughter of former FBI Director James Comey.
Maureen Comey, the daughter of the ex-FBI Director James Comey, has been fired from the U.S. Attorney's Office there in the Southern District of New York. Remember, she just worked on the Diddy trial. She also has worked on the Epstein case. The Associated Press has it as follows, that the DOJ has fired Maureen Comey. Now, she is the daughter, like I said, of James Comey. She was a prosecutor in the federal cases against Sean Diddy Combs and Jeffrey Epstein. That's according to two people familiar with the matter telling the AP that today. There was no specific reason, though, given for her firing from the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. Now, her termination comes shortly after she prosecuted Combs, who was acquitted of cocaine and racketeering charges. The rapper was convicted of those lesser prostitution-related offenses. Remember, he'll be sentenced in October. Now, the DOJ recently appeared to acknowledge the existence of an investigation into James Comey, though the basis for that inquiry is unclear. Remember, he was abruptly fired by President Trump in Trump's first term in 2017. So, this might be news to you. Maybe you don't even know. James Comey has a daughter who worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York on very high-profile cases, like the Sean Diddy Combs case, like the Epstein saga.
This level of deep state protection makes the political maneuvering around these cases even more fascinating, particularly when you look at Donald Trump's involvement. Trump has a highly complicated history with this crowd. Newly surfaced FBI interview summaries reveal that Trump actually called the Palm Beach police chief back in the summer of 2006, long before Epstein was a household name. Trump allegedly told the chief, "Thank goodness you're stopping him. Everyone has known he's been doing this."
Newly released documents tonight say President Trump personally warned officials about Jeffrey Epstein decades ago. An FBI interview summary describing how President Trump called the then Palm Beach police chief to tell him, "Thank goodness you're stopping Jeffrey Epstein. Everyone has known he's been doing this." Adding people in New York knew Epstein was disgusting.
He kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his Mar-a-Lago club because Jeffrey Epstein was a creep, and that remains true. And this call, if it did happen, corroborates exactly what President Trump has said from the beginning.
But President Trump said this in 2019.
No, I had no idea. I had no idea.
The former Palm Beach police chief, Michael Ryder, not commenting to NBC News, but telling the Miami Herald the interview with Donald Trump happened in the summer of 2006. According to the document, the president told Ryder he was around Epstein once when teenagers were present, and Mr. Trump said he got the hell out of there, and added about Epstein's convicted co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell, she is evil, and to focus on her.
Yet, despite this early stance against Epstein, Trump recently found himself caught in a massive media storm regarding Diddy. Top-tier outlets reported explosive rumors that insiders at the White House were seriously discussing a presidential pardon for Diddy, who was facing severe federal charges for transporting individuals across state lines for illicit purposes. The rumor mill went crazy, wondering why Trump would ever let a music mogul walk free. Trump eventually addressed it, admitting he once thought Diddy was a nice guy, but noted the mogul had been incredibly hostile toward him during the political campaign, essentially shutting down the pardon talks. But political analysts and cultural commentators like Dr. Umar argue there are entirely different motives at play, pointing to deep-rooted racial and political biases within the administration's legacy.
With regard to Donald Trump's refusal to pardon Sean Puffy Combs or to commute the sentence of Sean Puffy Combs, because he don't have to pardon him, Art. He could just commute the sentence and say he served enough time, let him go home. You know, he's not doing that either. And I'm gonna tell you why. It's not necessarily due to the fact that he got an issue with Diddy. And we know Donald Trump is a racist. He's a bigot. He can't stand black people. We know that. He has a whole history of racism. His father was a racist. His grandfather, Frederick Trump, who immigrated to America from Germany, because Trump is a second generation American. Okay, if you don't count the first generation, the arriving generation. But his grandfather, who immigrated here, Frederick Trump, he couldn't stand black folks. He couldn't stand black folks. In fact, Donald Trump's father, I think, Art, either the father or the grandfather, but I think it's the father, Fred Trump. He was even allegedly, he has been accused of being sympathetic to the Ku Klux Klan. And we know for a fact that Donald Trump's father and possibly even grandfather, they were well known in New York for practicing residential discrimination against black people. And so was Donald Trump. So the grandfather, father, and Trump, all German. Donald Trump is a German, by descent. They were all known to not like black people and discriminate against them in the leasing and purchasing of their real estate in New York. So you're talking about a white supremacist here.
Whether it is Epstein's impossible demise, Diddy's seized tapes, or the sudden firing of top federal prosecutors, the pattern is undeniable. The system isn't trying to expose the truth. The system is trying to manage the fallout. Jaguar Wright warned us about this overlap years ago, and she was labeled a lunatic. Today, she looks like the only person who is actually paying attention. We are watching a global protection racket scramble to cover its tracks, sacrificing a few highly visible pawns to ensure the true kings and queens of this dark chessboard remain entirely untouched. What do you think is really going on behind closed doors? Are these high-profile arrests genuine justice or just a massive cover-up for the people truly in charge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.